Hey, what's up, guys? We are currently in a recession, but what can 2008 recession teach us about this one? I will answer this question in this video, then Chamath Palihapitiya will give his own market predictions. In 2008, Wall Street blew up the economy. The 2008 housing bubble not caused by the stroke of bad luck. It was caused by some fundamentally poor choices made by Wall Street. During the housing boom, banks had given mortgages to people with bad credits. Even your dog could qualify for those mortgage loans. Many banks then sold those mortgages as investment called mortgage-backed securities to other banks, who bundled the debt with other similar loans and created those toxic mortgages. The idea was that those toxic mortgages would make banks money when those loans would be paid off. Not sure if your dog would be able to pay off mortgage, but unsurprisingly, the foreclosure increased. Many banks began to fail. In order to fix the problem, the government passed the reform like a Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform and Consumer Protection Act in 2010 and created asset relief program of $700 billion to let government bail out failing banks. At that time, bail out big banks and let other industries fail, such as auto sector, was highly controversial. Many felt it was rewarding companies for making bad decisions, but ultimately government had to step in and keep the financial system from completely collapsing. In 2020, Main Street has collapsed. The current recession is not caused by the broken link within the system, but from the external threat, a worldwide illness known as a black swan event that happens once a century. In order to keep illness from spreading, many governments forced non-essential businesses to close their doors and brought in lockdown orders, bringing many industries to the knees. Market has already almost recovered. S&P 500 is almost positive year to date. Market thinks we will see sunshines and rainbows from now on. But throughout the history, markets has been punished with a central control intervention. Have you ever noticed when you take a walk in the woods, there is a sign that says, "Please do not feed the animals"? Why do you think that sign is there? Do you think that sign is there because they don't want you to feed animals with specific foods? No. The reason for that sign, if you feed wild animals, they lose their ability to gather food in the woods, and as a result, they become less resilient and their survival is at risk. What I just described is free market. The best examples of free market can be found in nature, where there is spontaneous flow without central control intervention. Another very similar example of free market is when wild animals fight each other for food. If you go to the place where lions and hyenas snap in each other for the piece of zebra and you start feeding those lions, they will automatically start expecting more and more food from you, and they will become more lazier and won't be able to survive if for some reason you will stop feeding them. The same has happened to the current market. Many companies such as airlines, hotels, and many restaurants would have been bankrupt by now if the Fed would not interfere. Just like in nature, there is only one way to survive. The Fed would have to continuously supply funds for those businesses. On my opinion, that isn't right. Zombie companies should fail, just like the weakest link in the wild will not survive. Let's go back to reality. If you look at this chart, we will see that volatility spiked drastically. We had swings up and down on a weekly basis by almost 20%. That's crazy. Last time we can see something like this was back 10 years ago in 2008 financial crisis. In fact, during that time volatility was even a bit less. Unemployment rate reached unprecedented levels. There were some shady cover-up or miscalculation about the current unemployment rate, but I'm pretty sure that we are currently about 20%. During 2008 housing bubble, the unemployment rate was around 10%. Currently, there are more than 43 million people unemployed. The University of Chicago estimated that 42% of recent job layoffs will be gone for good. If we do some simple math, 42% of 43 million, that's roughly 18 million people will remain unemployed. Slightly less than 10% unemployment rate will remain. That is the harsh truth. I have few friends who used to work in the restaurants that won't be coming back to work. Plus, they do not have any other essential skills to get a job in some highly rewarded sector. Let's not get carried away too much, and let's take a look at Chamath Palihapitiya, what he has to say about our current economy and the stock market.
Chamath, it's great to see you this morning. I think where I want to start is the big news of today and what's become a debate, the Fed planning to buy up ETFs backed by bonds, and what that means, and what do you think it says about our economy, and what kind of debate you think there's going to be in this country about the steps the government's taking?
Well, I think that if there was any doubt before, there should be no doubt now that we have completely divorced the economy from the stock and the bond markets. And, you know, the Fed has been the principal agent of that obfuscation. And so, you know, what these guys are doing now is, with the ballooning balance sheet and all of this money going in to prop up companies, what you're going to start is a really bad, or you're going to accelerate a really bad deflationary super cycle here. So, you know, if you think about this, Andrew, like the best technology companies in the world have literally been training billions of consumers to not really spend money, right? The whole idea is if you wait, tomorrow you'll get more for less, whether that's YouTube or Facebook or Google or Amazon. The point is that these guys have really conditioned people that, you know, you on balance want to actually not be spending that much money because we'll just be giving you more and more value. And when you on top of that then add to the fact that the Fed comes and pumps in all of this money that has to go someplace, consumers respond by picking these companies that give them more for less. That's where all the profits get trapped. As a result, a handful of companies really disproportionately perform and inflate the equity markets. The companies that actually traffic in traditional business models that don't necessarily have tech at their disposal get decimated. And so that cycle is just going to get exacerbated and exacerbated. So in the real world, things will continue to get cheaper for the future.
Chamath, though, here's the question. And I'm not advocating the Fed doesn't do these things because I don't think that there's many other options. The problem is that it's a blunt instrument to a large degree. And while you'd love to make the stimulus, if you will, more effective or get it to the right people, we don't have a system of government that necessarily is, at least can or is willing to do that.
Well, we have to figure out how to break this cycle of deflation. And when we're a debtor, when you are a debtor, the best thing for you is some form of inflation, or at least to minimize the effects of deflation. And the reality is that we do have a system, and you don't have to pick who the quote unquote right people are. The right people is every citizen of the United States. And I've said this before, but this is a point in time where direct fiscal stimulus should be going to the hands of US taxpayers. It is the most effective way to blunt this unnecessarily rampant asset inflation in the markets and at least balance it with incentives in the hands of consumers to buy things. And if you don't break this cycle and teach a new pattern of behavior, we're going to be looking at a Japanese-style deflationary period where we'll have 10 years of unemployment, the economy will just be stagnant, and we'll wonder why equity markets keep going to all-time highs when it doesn't actually map to what you see in the real world on a day-to-day basis. I would say that 90% of the gains actually happened when the Fed just signaled that they were going to do something. You're absolutely right. It calmed the markets down enough where the best companies could go and actually get the capital that they needed. But then if you actually separate it and look at it now, the Fed's primary and secondary facilities aren't necessarily going to affect or help the best companies, because in order to sort of qualify for these programs, you need to go through a whole bunch of hoops. You need to sign up for, supervision on executive compensation. You are going to self-select, at least in their primary facility, for probably the worst performing companies. And when you go and buy ETFs, you're buying baskets of things that also contain a bunch of these zombie companies. The best companies can and will continue to self-finance in the markets by themselves. And yeah, you're right, the Fed did calm the waters. But by now actually stepping in and spending more and injecting more capital, what you're going to see is the equity markets rip higher. You're going to see the credit markets continue to basically go towards negative rates. And none of that stuff does anything to actually fix the economy. And so asset inflation, we learned this from 2008 to now. Asset inflation does not solve income disparity. It actually doesn't solve full employment. It doesn't do any of the things we needed to do for it to be a robust economy. What it does is allow people who play in the financial markets to make money. Those don't trickle down to normal people. And until we actually admit that to ourselves, and until we realize that this dogmatic idea that inflation is bad, that's a dated idea, we're not going to move forward. And so I appreciate the fact that the Fed did something. I think it was critical. I think it was great that they said it. But now actually acting and pumping in all of this money on top of the money that's already gone in is creating a deflationary supercycle in the United States that is not helpful. Consumers are not going to spend. They are going to save.
I totally agree that the current economy is completely detached from the stock market and from the reality in that matter. Economy will remain stagnant while the stock market will continue to go up, at least in the short term. But there will be reversion to the mean. Eventually, the market will have to match with GDP level, because it always have. Then we will see some conversion between the markets and the economy. Let me know what do you guys think about our current economy and the stock market. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't.